All right, I'm with Claudia Restrepo, the lead actor and producer of Peak Season. So let's talk about Peak Season. What's the general story behind it?
The general story is Amy, a New Yorker who is newly engaged, planning her wedding, goes for a vacation in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and sort of approaches this crossroads when she meets a wilderness guide named Lauren, who sort of presents the what if, the path not taken. And she sort of falls into this will they, won't they romance. And you have to watch the film to figure out what she did.
All right. Well, so I guess the question I have is, how did the film come about? Where did you come into contact with it? Where's your touch point with the film?
So the film was sort of conceived by one of our co-directors, Henry Lovner. His family has lived in Wyoming a long time, or sort of like the last 15 years, and so he's become very familiar with a lot of the sort of characters of that town, sort of the interesting, like different socioeconomic things going on there. But he also wanted to do sort of a vacation romance, sort of in the vein of Lost in Translation or the Before trilogy. And so he came up with this story, and I have known Henry and Stephen, the two directors, for many years. We all met together sort of in the digital minds of producing videos for BuzzFeed Video, which was like kind of all of our film grad school. We all met there and have a long work history together. And I produced Henry and Stephen's first feature film, The End of Us, which was filmed during 2020, like heart of the pandemic. You really become very close with people there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when their second film came around, I was already going to be sort of a given. I was going to be involved somehow in the production. I am also an actress, and it just sort of worked out that this role was perfect for me. And I didn't have to fight much. I just had to put my hat in the ring and wait for them to find the hat and be like, "You're right.
All
You're right.
right.
This is
Well,
good for you."
let's talk about both roles. I want to talk
Yeah.
first about the acting. So what was it's a very interesting role. I mean, I think it's one of those that I think we can all relate to, anyone of us who have ever been in relationships. And but what was it about it that said, okay, I think I can take the lead here, Amy? Or what was you know, talk to me about just kind of getting into the character or falling in love with the character.
Yeah. I mean, since we're here on the Film Threat podcast, I'll be very honest and share the tidbits that I sometimes don't at like a Q&A at a festival,
Mm-hmm.
which is that I date one of the directors. And I don't say that to say like, oh, that's how I got this role, but that we had been together for many years. I had been traveling with him to Wyoming to like visit his family for many years. And to be honest, a lot of the Amy character was somewhat inspired like by my real experiences visiting, like going to this very luxurious place, this
Mm-hmm.
like really beautiful place, but that has sort of almost been like co-opted by like a specific type of wealth or income bracket.
Yeah.
And as much as I love to visit those places, I often joke like, oh, I love luxury. I often feel out of place there. And a lot of the experiences, like when I was reading the script, I was like, that's happened to me. I wonder where you got that. Interesting. So I felt very comfortable sort of being like, I think I can play this role because like there's a lot of Amy that I already resonate with, already felt very close to, and some things that were like truly experiences that I had, regardless of whether they inspired the writer to write
Mm-hmm.
them. I was like, this is like, I get this. I am this person.
Yeah, I while watching the film, it's kind of that contrast between urban living and rural living, or at least that's the portion of it that I picked up. I know about the kind of the economics, especially the tourism economics that goes behind it, but yeah, there is some kind of attraction. Even I have today to kind of just doing the Green Acres thing and leaving the big city behind and going and
It's
living.
everybody's fantasy, like one way or the other. You're always going to worry or wonder about like the path not traveled. Should I
Mhm.
give up all these conveniences and all these things I've worked so hard for? Would I be happier with a simpler, you know, more rustic life? I think everybody wonders that.
Oh yeah, I mean you mentioned there with simplicity. That's kind of I think what attracts me to it all. So okay, so let's also talk now about the producer role. You know, and I think we should probably preface it by saying a low budget film. And
Hmm.
so I'm just curious because I don't think, we tend to talk to writers, directors, and actors, but we don't I don't get to pick the brain of a producer too often. But what was when you say you're a producer, I know that can mean a lot of things, but
Can mean a lot of things,
specifically,
yeah.
yeah, specifically for this film, and I guess your relationship with the directors, what do you see yourself? How do you describe your role as a producer?
When, especially like my role in producing, I think both films has been like a very much on-set producer, and because we're like such a small film crew, I'm honestly taking up a lot of like creative, the ones that would like often have been handed to other creatives, like sourcing, you know, wardrobe, or the on-set thing of
Mhm.
making sure everybody's fed, like these roles that, are like so many different roles that
Yeah.
usually have their own names, all sort of like fall under this bucket of just like on-set producer, which is what I was doing for both productions, honestly.
Mhm.
So a lot of, sourcing things, making sure actors that were, traveling were arriving on
Mhm.
time, transpo, like literally when you have like 60 credits rolling
Yeah.
after a film, condense those all and just like put them under producer is like often what I was doing, but not as much the side of like, we had another producer who was so much more hands-on with like paperwork
Right.
and SAG and making sure people got paid, and the much more like
Yeah. I mean,
computer
you
side of
can't
the
do
producing.
everything. It's,
You can't do everything, and so
and-
I'm more useful like doing the communicating with actors and doing
mhm.
wardrobe and making sure people are fed and scheduling and things like that.
Yeah, a lot of logistics.
A lot of the logistics, yeah.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, for peak season, was there a lot of, you know, was it a small crew then? Were you? I mean, we talked briefly before starting about the fact that I think everyone has to wear a lot of hats in indie.
Yeah, I mean, very small. Like I think on set the actual crew was 8 people,
Mhm.
so pretty small. So everyone worked 4 or 5 jobs for sure.
Uh-huh. And then and so I guess I'll ask the dumb question, but is there a book, or is this just something you had to learn on the job, and just try to pick as many brains as you possibly could along the way?
For like being able to step in and like produce these
Yeah.
films.
Hmm.
Well, we all worked together, as I said, at BuzzFeed Video. So we had produced what sort of ends up being like dozens and dozens of short films all
Hmm.
together. So we already had working relationships. We already sort of understood everybody's strengths. There were no egos, with working with each other. We just sort of all understood if a role needs to be filled, whoever is available can step in. So really, it's for me, producing was just making myself available to the filmmakers and say, what do you need done today? What do you need done within this week? What do you need done within the next 3 weeks? And, creating that list and knowing my strengths and like what I can get done and how I can help out. And then at the end of, several months, you
Hmm.
hopefully have a film.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the actual production. Because I one of the trends I see in indie filmmaking is it's either shot in the woods or the desert.
Oh
And
yeah, you got to use the resources available to you.
yeah. So what uh I'm pretty sure the story kind of lend itself to it, but what are the challenges you face not only going in and setting up production in the woods, but the actual filming and filming of the filming itself, because you guys are in the water a lot.
Yeah, we were. I mean, the biggest threat of the being in the water was mosquitoes. So there was a
Mhm.
lot of making sure everyone had bug spray. That was part of it. Lauren and Amy would not have had a very romantic adventure if they were just like scratching themselves all the time. So that was part of the challenge. But the nice thing actually about having such a small crew in Jackson Hole, especially, is like, I mean, everyone says this, a small crew is very nimble. You can get more done. It's not a company move of
Mhm.
50, actors and crew members. It's 8 people hopping in cars and going to the next location. So that's sort of an advantage. Um, yeah, in terms of like other
Mhm.
challenges that were there, we were never like just out in the wilderness. I mean, it wasn't like a road genre film where
Yeah.
we're like camping or like always on the move, but we were often outdoors. Probably the hardest
Mhm.
day is we there's a scene where Amy and Lauren go on this big hike, and that is truly a day when I think we did not realize the elevation gain on that hike, and it really is like five of us, like the two directors operating camera, a friend running sound, and me and Lauren, the actors,
Yeah.
and just like carting ourselves up a mountain. And it was definitely worth it. The final shots are incredible, but it was a rough day,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Well, then let me ask you about Jackson Hole itself. I
Mm.
can't imagine it's just hey, let's grab the camera gear and make a movie. In terms of, do you have what is the coordination between you and the production, and then the is it the state or the city or the town?
Yeah, so a lot of location scouting, a lot of, reaching out to the local businesses there, seeing if we could film some places that were a little more iconic, like say the Million Dollar Cowboy Bar. That
Mhm.
one, it's a Jackson staple. They're going to ask for a little money. They know what they got.
Yeah.
So definitely coordinating with them. Some places were like, honestly, during the course of our shoot, we were like, we need to shoot the scene between Amy and Lauren where they find each other in the town. Where is that going to be? And that was like during the course of shooting, finding that location, speaking to the owners of that location. And for smaller spots, it's not really like in LA where you go into a bodega and they're like, you're the fifth person to ask if you can shoot here today. Here's our release form. Here's how much we ask. Like most places in LA will charge. They know, they
Yeah.
get the game. In Jackson, not a lot of film shoots actually happen there because it is so expensive for larger shoots. So it's not really inundated, I think, with a lot of people requesting it as a film location. So many people for smaller businesses were very open to having us there
Um,
and just being like, sure, we'll sign a release. Come on by. It's going to be like, and we had the advantage of being such a small crew that when we said it was not going to interfere much with their business, we meant it because it was really
mhm.
just, 5 or 6 people versus having to be like, okay, we're gonna have to shut it down. We're doing night for day, and
Yeah.
we're gonna take 3 days. It was like, no, a few hours of their time, and a lot of people were really very hospitable and very willing to let us film.
Yeah, I would imagine, planning is the big thing. If it looks like you're planned, you have everything planned, and you're confident, and you're sticking to the schedule, that they're more than willing to let you in there and do what you need to do.
Yeah, and some locations were a lot of the ones that we shot for Jackson were LA, like the restaurant scenes.
Uh-huh.
It just would have been, there are limited locations in Jackson, and it's such a tourist place that like to ask a restaurant to shut down for us to shoot would have been so expensive. We shot in LA for a lot of those.
All right. Well, so let me ask you this question. The You have a friend who wants to wants to produce a film, a small indie film. What piece of advice would you give them based on your experience with peak season?
Certainly using resources that are available to you. Like if we're talking really ultra low budget, I'm like, are Wyoming made sense because we also had places to like put up our actors and crew. We had really pre-existing relationships there. I've, had some friends sort of ask, oh, maybe I could shoot something in LA really low budget, but there are like tax breaks in other cities. Maybe I should go there. And I'm like, well, in that other city, are you putting up a crew of 25
Mhm.
people? Like that balloons your budget in a second. Like that math doesn't math. You're much better off doing something in LA where people probably already live, have their own location, have their own home to stay in, keeping it as small as possible. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of other like advice to take away from this. I would say,
Yeah, maybe you could address the outdoor shooting as well.
yeah, I was about to say, like, for our team, it was like an ambitious film in that we had so little resources, but the film itself, like, trusts a lot of the chemistry between the leads to carry a lot of it. Like, it's not like we're having big set pieces or action sequences, but because it was set in a place with so much character, you really could, beyond pointing a camera at the mountains and just getting some of the most beautiful scenery you're going to get in North America. It also is just like a city with a lot of personality, like you're kind of the Jackson already has a fantasy and like
Hmm.
aesthetic to it that really translates really well to film. And that was certainly an advantage.
Yeah.
It kind of like the the aesthetic, the feel, the like theme is already there. Like Jackson is already like kind of cosplaying as itself. It's like very fun to watch sort
Hmm.
of the people of the city even like wear their cowboy hats and do their thing. And it is a hard to tell who's the actual farmhand and who is the the tourist, who just bought that hat 2 seconds ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say about the film, there are a lot of outdoor scenes, and there was never a sense that it was just shot. Hey, let's just put the camera over there and start shooting. But I think there was a lot of thought in the way the directors had framed the shots. And I really appreciate that because again, you just want to make something that looks interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. We joke a lot about sort of like point the camera anywhere and you're going to get something beautiful. And you are, but there still has to be like there was plenty of location scouting. There was a lot of thought as to what location really like supports the emotional thing that's happening in the story at that time. What's going to work best for what scene. Yeah, there was a lot of planning.
Yeah. I mean, I'll refer to the opening scene in the river. It's because it's not one angle the entire time. There's several angles, and yeah, uh, really appreciate that in terms of they just when you make an indie film, make the extra effort. And
Yeah, it still has to be dynamic. You're telling a story through medium of film. Yeah, you can't just have a, steady, 8 steady 2 shots and then that makes a film. There is definitely a lot of craft that went into it.
all right, so tell us about how we can see Peak Season.
Well, it will be on VOD on September 2nd. If you are a WGA member, we are having a screening. I will at the WGA Theater. I will double check my calendar to make sure I get this date right on Saturday, September 7th at
Okay.
3 p.m. If you're a WGA member, definitely come check that out. But if you are watching from home, it'll be on VOD September 2nd.
Okay. And then lastly, were you guys at South by Southwest or am I?
We premiered at South by 2023 in March, and that was fantastic. It was such a fun time, and that was like the festival we really wanted because our
Mhm.
first film that we all made together got in 2021, but it was, shut down because of COVID, so we all had to kind of watch from home in
Mhm.
our living rooms. So it was kind of a chance for the whole filmmaking team to reunite, 2 years later with another film that we were also so proud of, and it was fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you talking with us.
You bet. Thanks.